Control is a third-person shooter developed by Remedy of Max Payne and Alan Wake fame, and released for the PC, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 in 2019. It has later been ported over to Xbox Series X and X, the PlayStation 5 and Google Stadia. For this review, I played the PlayStation 4 version of the game. The game starts with its protagonist, Jesse Fadden, walking into an impossibly large concrete building, the oldest house, the Federal Bureau of Control, in search for a lost brother, only to find it in lockdown, taken over by some paranormal force named the Hiss. More on the game's story later. For now, let us focus on the gameplay. This can be split into 3 different parts: combat, exploration and platforming, and puzzle solving. Of these, combat is by far what you will be doing the most of, so let us start with that. Early in the game, Jesse finds the service weapon, a gun that throughout the game gains the ability to shift form between different gun archetypes. That be its starting pistol function, a shotgun, automatic gun, sniper or grenade launcher. Using these and the various paranormal abilities she picks up throughout the game, Fadden must fade through hordes of the Hiss, the old security staff and operatives of the Bureau, now taken by the Hiss. This might sound basic, and at least in the start of the game it is, but what puts the fighting in Control heads and shoulders over a lot of its contemporaries is its focus on movement. If you stay still in this game, you quickly end up dead. This is for 2 reasons. Reason 1 is the game's enemies and their varied abilities to make you hurt. Staying on the move is essential for staying ahead of bullets, dodging rockets and getting away from exploding ones. And this is something you need to do, as getting hit will eat through Jesse's health quickly. Something that leads us to reason 2. That health isn't getting back on its own. Control has no regenerating health, so if you get hit, you'll have to get it back some other way. That way is by killing enemies and picking up the health they drop. This forces the player into a loop of dodging enemies or attacking back, always zipping in and out to pick up lost health. All this while the screen fills up with a spectacle of enemies, bullets, effect and minor environmental destruction, and while you have to manage the power bars of both your weapon and abilities. And this is all made better with the movement focused paranormal ability Jesse picks up throughout the game. Aside from the dash, I won't spoil these in the review, but let me just say that the way a combat encounter looks by the end of the game has evolved into something fundamentally different, but that stays consistently fun throughout. And that's even before I talk about just how good all of this feels. Especially the launch ability, basically your force throw. Yet, my praise for the way the combat works is for, well, when everything works. Unfortunately, enemies way too seldom become enough of a threat that they force you into this loop. As said before, enemies can really put the hurt on you, but they often just don't. I'm not going to speculate too much as of why this is. Just leave it with saying that I wish my enemies punished me more for making obvious mistakes. So, over to platforming. It's basic, and when it comes to the few platforming segments of the game, I am a little disappointed that they don't carry over any of the franticness of Control's combat, or at least lean heavier into moving platforms and obstacles. But this is more of something I wished for after the fact than something I actually missed during my time with the game, and what little platforming sequences the game has stays serviceable throughout. In the same vein, puzzles are mostly here to provide a break from combat, and they do a fine job at this. Nothing spectacular to write home about, but I do think they strike a good balance between forcing you to stop and think, but never making you stuck. Some puzzles can be a bit vague though, and some had me completing them without fully realizing what I did right. Something that doesn't necessarily feel wrong given the setting they are in, but it's not really what you'd want from a good puzzle. Both of these, and especially the puzzles, are a step above what you'd expect from the genre, and given what they're meant to be, breaks from the core gameplay loop, I give them a solid thumbs up. So, over to the real star of the game, its setting. The oldest house is great, a concrete building stretching into infinitum that Fadden enters in the search of a missing brother. I must admit that I was concerned at first. A concrete building doesn't seem like an interesting place to spend the game's 13-hour runtime, but Remedy has done an admirable effort at varying the environments. This is partly done by having the house take you away from its concrete walls and into strange new places, and some of these are really striking. But mostly it is done by varying up the house's environments with offices, wooden panels, mold, striking colors and such. Suffice to say, you won't be tiring of Control's environments anytime soon. Neither are you likely to tire of its world. I've already touched in on paranormal abilities, the something named His, and a seeming infinite building named the oldest house. This might give you an idea about the world Control is setting, a world where other dimensions touch into our own, where strange forces bind to iconic items and give them powers, and where all folklore you grew up with might be true. It's a pretty great world Remedy has built, so it's a shame that so much of the world building is found in written notes spread throughout the oldest house. I could harp more on this, but I would only be repeating the intro of Rasputin's video, reading in video games, and why I barely do it, in a worse way. So go watch that instead. Let me instead move on to Control's The Oldest House. The house has an almost Metroidvanian feel to it, with its interconnected levels off-gated by locked doors and environmental hazards, hidden rooms and power-ups. Now, don't get me wrong, Control is not a Metroidvania, but the similarities it shares with the genre contributes to this feeling. I know that is agonizingly unspecific, but I truly don't know how to put it into words other than saying that Control presents a world well worth driving into. The moment-to-moment story being told in Control on the other side is serviceable. It never becomes bad and actually stays pretty interesting throughout, mostly given its setting, but it does have a problem with maintaining momentum. It starts out great, trailing you along with question after question about what's going on, giving you just enough breadcrumbs of answers to keep you going, while the story's pace keeps you moving from story beat to story beat. But then that pace just stops. Instead of continuing a quest, Fadden is sent on several sidetracks that doesn't add much to the story. Now, it does pick up towards the end, but here the story manages to feel rushed at times. Not in a massive way, and I don't think I would have noted on this normally, but after the plot has slugged along for so long, it really sticks out. That slugging isn't made better by the inclusion of bureau alerts, random mission to eliminate some targets or to destroy something. These add absolutely nothing and only serve to further destroy the game's pace. I cannot for the life of me understand why Remedy chose to include this. Luckily, they can just be ignored. Control has side quests. These does come with the same problem of diverging from the momentum of the main story, But given that they have more varied objectives and flesh out the world, I don't have the same problem with them, and I see their inclusion as a net positive for the game. If you decide to play through Control though, please note that these can be done after you complete the main story, so consider saving these till then. Anyways, moving on. The Ultimate Edition of Control comes bundled with its 2 pieces of DLC, the Foundation and AVP. These become available by playing through the main game story, AVP during its 3rd act, and the Foundation upon completing the game's main story. Both of these are separate story, more or less divorced from the main game, and both are, for the scope of this review, more Control. Both of the DLC presents you with a new section of the oldest house. The Foundation include a couple of sections that have greater focus on platforming throughout more levels, unfortunately without adding much complexity to it. An AVP is a tie-in with Remedy's Alan Wake series. It also has a bigger focus on light mechanics. Read, you have to find a light source and point it at something, or complete a puzzle to turn the lights in a room on. This is not a tie-in I can comment much about how it works, as I haven't played those games. But I will note that the story the DLC tells still works without prior knowledge to Alan Wake series. Something that is good, but at the same time I can imagine someone that has been longing for more Alan Wake content will be disappointed at what is offered here. But yeah, ostensibly this is just more Control, carrying over both strengths and weaknesses. And while a part of me wishes they were more, I am mainly more than happy to play more Control. All in all, I give Control Ultimate Edition a final score of redacted out of 6. Looking back at what I have written, I am somewhat disappointed at my own ability to convey that I really like Control. It's a game with flaws, more than I have mentioned here, but these don't change the fact that Control does some things really good. So, despite its flaws, I can wholeheartedly recommend playing Control.